The scribes can't keep up. You know, there were so many visions and so many songs and so many poems and so many, these drawings that the scribes, the people who were listening to these and then were charged with recording them, couldn't keep up, couldn't keep writing. And things did slow down because the ministry had a lot of control. But that, the Shakers and Spiritualism continues on. The North family at Mount Lebanon was particularly strong in its belief and support of spiritualism. There was a man named James Peebles who is still studied by spiritualists and wrote a lot. He was an associate member of the Shakers. He did never totally take up the cross here, but he came and visited often and trucked the Shakers off to spiritualist conventions in Cleveland and Boston and Hartford and all kinds of places around, so the Shakers could come and participate with the spiritualists. He saw them as the first line of spiritualism in America. And people lived to be 100, so they had a major promoter in him. He was actually fairly well respected. But the incident that I think I remember the best is, or the one that I wanted to share the best is, Sister Mildred Barker, who was a sister at Sabbath Lake, Maine, who died in 1990, tells a story about having her caretaker, the woman that was responsible for raising her, was Elder Paulina Springer. And Elder Paulina, on her deathbed, asked Mildred to come into the room, and she asked Mildred as a young girl then, maybe 10 or 12 years old, if she would promise to become a Shaker. And Mildred said, it took me my whole life to really do that, but I couldn't get away from the promise that I made her that I would. And at that moment, Mildred stayed in the room, and some of the younger sisters apparently left, and a couple of the older ones with Mildred were there. And Paulina said, I know my time is short because there are two angels standing at the foot of the bed waiting to take me. And so those kinds of impressions in this century are very strong. And I've been told, I've had another, Mildred actually talks about a song that she learned from Elders Paulina, she said that this is a song that Paulina got from a little bird, learned from a small bird, and it was during the period of manifestation. She would have been that old to go back to that time period. And the song goes, I can't do this ever, but Mother has come with a beautiful song, ho, ho, tell me ho. Mother has come with her beautiful song, ho, ho, tell me ho. She has come to bless her children dear, ho, ho, tell me ho. And Christ the Savior will be near, ho, ho, tell me ho. And Mildred, I heard her sing that song years, and it's always introduced by, this is one of the early gift songs that came out of that period of manifestation. And it's about the people that came and the people that had their messages were Mother Ann and Jesus and Abraham, and all of the famous, Washington, Lafayette, all of the famous came. I think you saw in the handouts that they loved African American spirits, Indian spirits, anybody that was foreign and odd was always, they were always interested in having them come and talk to them from the spirit world. So I think I'm going to turn that back to Ruth. And at the end of this, I just want to make a comment about this room.
Okay.
So,
this idea of proof was present with the Fox sisters. As they heard the rappings, they wondered themselves if they heard what they heard. They, of course, brought their parents in, and then they began to bring the neighbors in, and then they got the neighbors to see if this was true, if they were hearing things, and the neighbors saw that the communication was right. So from the beginning of its presence in America as a movement, this idea of proof. On the women thing, just as the Shakers saw a female and male Godhead, so did spiritualists. As you heard say there is no gender in God, and women can go anywhere as can men. And the Second Great Awakening also preached that women were absolutely on an equal plane. So there's a lot of this idea of women's rights in these movements at this time. So then the question was, well, what about spiritualism today? We have a friend who is today in charge of the renovation of the United Nations, and who was most recently the architect in charge of the renovation of Ellis Island. So when you have those kinds of jobs, you know, you're a very particular, matter-of-fact sort of person. And Michael said to me, when I told him what I was doing, with you, he said, well, I would have said it was poppycock. Until my wife and I bought a house in Scarsdale. And we bought it from an elderly lady who set great store by her garden. And come spring, I went out into the garden and I began to work among the peonies for Chip her pride and joy. When all of a sudden she floated past me. And I closed my eyes, I rejected that, I didn't want to hear anything of it. Of course, that's ridiculous. When I opened it, my eyes, she was still hovering. And I flew into the house and I said to my wife, this is happening. This is crazy. And he said, and ever since I've had to think that it did happen. It actually did happen. And I said to him, well, you know, Michael, you wouldn't have told me this about yourself had I not told you that I was exploring spiritualism. And he said, that's true. I don't really tell this story. And I think that as I've gone out in the world since I've begun this research, I've told the story. Quite a number of people have stepped up with a story of their own that they don't usually tell to people. So I want to pause and ask if anyone here has a story of something that is just as inexplicable. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, let's hear it.
They're both related to deaths. One of them was a friend in college who, the short story was, died abruptly in a car accident, a very unexpected situation. But I knew he was a crazy driver, so it didn't shock me that much, but I was surprised at his short death. He was in college. And I ran to his house because he had a very strange family that he didn't like very much, and we were very good friends. So I thought, I can't let go of him like this, in that way, because I know that they will not invite me to the funeral. I will not be involved in anything, and I have to say goodbye to him. So, short story, then I ran to his house, begged him to let me in, and I said, please can I go upstairs to his room? Because we would go sit in his room, listen to his music and everything else. It took a long time, got upstairs, got in that room. His physical presence wasn't there, but he was there, without a doubt. And similar thing happened with the death of my brother last year, where it was when he was passing away. I could feel near the end there was a communication that he was experiencing, and I was watching it and seeing it and feeling it. But I can't exactly express it because I still haven't processed it all completely.
Well, this feeling of not being able to process it all
Yeah.
is very much part of these experiences, and one of the reasons people, I think, don't tell about them, because you can't exactly hold it in your hand. And I forgot to say that Michael received, 3 days later, a phone call saying that on the day he had seen this lady, she had died, right at that moment. So that was really much different. So it was about that. Okay, so Jerry and I went to visit Surwati Gilbert. I think it's Gilbert, who is the Secretary General of the Sufi Order International up on the mountain. And we told him that we were studying spiritualism as it was played out in the Shakers, and Jerry sent him the material, and he read it very carefully, and he agreed to see us. And then he sent us a paper which we'd be happy to distribute to you all. It's just 2 pages, and it discusses the Sufi view of spiritualism. But in short, this is what he told us, that their order was founded in 1910 by Hazrat Inayat Khan. And Khan, acknowledging that psychic powers were real, warned his followers not to stir them up, because they needed to come naturally. You shouldn't be out there holding seances and rappings. You should be aiming to be the best person you could be, the most spiritual person you could be, and they would come naturally if you attained that level. And that they should focus on means of service to others, which was the way to be to the highest path in Sufism. And he counseled his followers as Muhammad had. And Sufism is a branch of a mystical branch of Islam, to die before death, meaning to experience the psychological process in which you lose of dying, and then you would lose your fear of death, and then you would see that it is just a part of life. And then you would finally see that going to the other side was hardly anything, because it wasn't a big demarcation. So he also said that he felt that the Shakers' gifts from the spirit world were not akin to the people who were trying to stir up the spirits through seances and other means, because he felt that the Shakers were leading such a spiritual life that they were naturally receiving these spirits. And he appreciated them. And then he said that when the Sufis bought the property from the Shakers, the elders told them that they had, there was a prophecy that others would come after them and carry on their work. And they thought that the Sufis were the ones. So I thought that was a very interesting piece of information. So that was a very, you want to add anything to that, Jerry?
That's fine.
Yeah, it was a really lovely man, and we had a wonderful visit. Where's Becky? Becky, may I give you this to hand out to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
So we went to visit the Spiritualist Church of New York City, which is on, I think, 36 in Lexington. A beautiful church. It's called the Swedenborg Church. And Swedenborg is often considered the father of spiritualism. And
his headquarters are actually in Pennsylvania.
yes.
And it's, like that was only just,
You didn't know they were connected?
yeah.
Yes.
I mean, he himself wandered into another world.
Yes.
You can't think about it.
Exactly.
But,
It was as if Einstein had all of a sudden said he had gone into another world after obtaining his great fame and great stature. This was a Swedenborg. So in this church called The Church, which is a Swedenborg church, the Spiritualist Church of America has a church. And
they share their premises.
that's right. So on Sundays,
Involved
and I'm going to invite you all to come next Sunday if you'd like. We can go.
in. Well, I know that.
You know?
I used to attend it.
But they also have one in Albany, which I haven't attended. So I thought if anybody were interested, I would go next Sunday. And usually I think they're from 6 to 8:30. You don't have to read this yet. What I was going to tell you about is the experience. So the church is quite beautiful, quite plain, and it was very ill attended. Maybe there in this large sanctuary there were 30 or 40 people scattered, and the two ministers, both women, came down to the front, and they sing, do hymns, very uplifting hymns, nothing sad, all very hopeful hymns. And then one of the preachers spoke about having been cured of MS through the spirit world. And then they do something called messaging. I'll come back to messaging.